This is understandable politics. Hello. Distant Greenland is unexpectedly in the top of world news, all because of Donald Trump, who wants to acquire the territory. Buy or take by force. From the American leader's mouth come ultimatums and threats. The U.S. must own the island, says the White House without mincing words. A land of eternal cold where there are more bears than people. Why does Trump need it? And what are Washington's plans for this piece of permafrost? Donald Trump, a true real estate enthusiast, suddenly eyed an icy lot the size of half the European Union in 2019. Why not buy Greenland? He asked at a press conference, as if discussing an abandoned casino. Denmark scoffed, the world laughed, but the American reflex kicked in. If something shines, it should be ours. Why Greenland? Do you want to be part of America?
You want to? Do you want Donald Trump to buy Greenland?
How did Denmark acquire a territory 50 times its size, and what do Vikings have to do with it? They named this land Greenland, the Green Country, in the 10th century to lure settlers. The trick worked, but by the 15th century the Scandinavians fled, leaving the ice, cold, and the right to be considered Danes to the Eskimos 500 years later. Before telling about the world's largest island, note that Denmark retains control over it. Greenland was first its colony, now an autonomous territory. The metropolis retains control over the island's foreign and financial policy, citizenship, and defense issues. Being part of the kingdom, Greenland has its own government and other authorities. The official currency on the island is the Danish krone. Greenland is not part of the EU, but has the status of an associated member with certain customs privileges, and its residents are EU citizens.
The island is strategically located in the Arctic, with the shortest route from Europe to North America passing through Greenland, and geographically, it is much closer to the latter, even though it is an autonomous territory of European Denmark.
The island's area is 2.2 million square kilometers. It is located northeast of North America and is almost entirely within the Arctic Circle. Greenland is 80% covered in ice with a maximum thickness of 3 kilometers. The ice sheet contains up to 10% of the world's freshwater reserves. The population is just over 55,000 people.
Strategic importance, a favorite excuse of empires. Back in 1946, Harry Truman offered Denmark $100 million for Greenland. Refusal, no problem. The U.S. established a military base on the island, the northernmost Pentagon outpost, from which missiles can be launched on demand, that is, at the first command.
The U.S. military base P2FEG operates in Greenland. It supports the missile attack warning system and gathers intelligence data from space. The base has a 3-kilometer runway and a deep water port. It is located in the north of the island, away from populated areas. Greenland holds an important strategic position as the shortest flight paths of ballistic missiles pass through the Arctic, and control over this territory is key to global security.
Today's military base hosts 600 soldiers and the SBX-1 radar system, capable of tracking ballistic missile launches up to 5,000 kilometers away. Such an early warning system for nuclear weapon launches. And surprise! Under the ice in 1968, a B-52 nuclear bomb was lost. Only its approximate location is known.
An uncontrolled plane on the morning of January 21, 1968, first flew north, then turned back, and crashed 11 kilometers from the base's runway onto the ice of North Star Bay. Components of thermonuclear bombs were scattered almost 5 kilometers around, spreading plutonium, americium, and uranium across the area. The fuel ignited and melted the ice. The plane's wreckage ended up at the ocean's bottom.
The disaster led to a scandal. As it turned out, the US was violating all agreements. Denmark had not given permission to place nuclear weapons in Greenland.
And the main thing is the placement of tracking stations and corresponding missile defense systems. Why? Because this island can control a significant part of Europe, including Russian territory, where intercontinental ballistic missiles aimed at the United States may be located, their flight path passing through this island's territory.
So, geographically, the island is a tempting piece for the White House. If Americans gain control, it will be their closest territory to Europe, automatically making it a crucial strategic element.
For Washington, it would serve as an auxiliary base in case of escalation, which may occur due to the recent decision to deploy American missiles in Germany. In the arms race initiated by the US, they will need not just an ally in Europe who may suddenly refuse their obligations in the face of danger, but a fully controlled territory offering no resistance. Although Greenland is separated from Europe by the Atlantic Ocean, it is still closer than the continental US.
By the way, the presence of an American military base still negatively affects the residents' relations with the US. Living under Washington's wing is not what the Inuit, a small but proud people of Greenland, want.
In the late 1950s, the residents of Thule from the eponymous Eskimo tribe sought compensation and later the return of lands they lost due to the construction of the American military base. Greenland's political forces advocate revising the 1951 Danish-American Defense Agreement and closing the Thule base. According to surveys conducted by Varian in 2025, 85% of Greenlanders oppose joining the US, only 6% support such a future.
But Washington doesn't give up. In 2020, the US opened a consulate in Greenland's capital, as did Moscow and Beijing. Most of the island's budget is formed thanks to Copenhagen, but Trump has been speculating on this, calling Greenland a burden for Denmark. Indeed, Denmark allocates about $700 million annually to the autonomy, but for them it's a drop in the ocean.
Denmark's annual budget is about $170 billion, and subsidies to the distant island do not exceed 0.5% of budget expenditures. Moreover, Denmark is among the 10 richest countries in the world. The state feels so confident that the central bank issues loans at just 0.05% per annum. Meanwhile, banks are willing to pay people to take out mortgages.
In recent years, the island has seen a rapid rise in average temperatures, 4 times faster than in other parts of the planet, leading to melting glaciers that reveal rich mineral deposits.
As of 2025, there are known reserves of 38 million tons of rare earth metals and 50 billion barrels of oil. Greenland's lands are also rich in gold, uranium, and other valuable minerals. According to analysts, the island's depths contain the entire periodic table.
The island's depths have deposits of copper, lead, zinc, silver, palladium, and other platinum group metals, uranium, tantalum, niobium, graphite, and rare earth elements. The European Commission classifies 25 out of 34 minerals as critical raw materials for producing batteries, wind turbines, and electric vehicles. In turn, the US government considers 43 key minerals as critically important.
Rare metals are vital for modern high-tech industries. However, over 70% of rare earths are mined in China. with whom Trump is in a trade war. Therefore, Greenland's mineral resources are a way to curb Beijing's dominance in the global market, and the behind-the-scenes games in Greenland have been going on for a long time.
Greg Barnes, CEO of Tanbreeze Mining, the developer of Greenland's largest rare earth metal deposit, told Reuters that the US and Denmark dissuaded the company from selling the deposit to China. Ultimately, it was sold to the American company Critical Metals. According to the new owner, Tony Sage, the deal was worth $5 million in cash and $211 million in Critical Metals shares, even though Chinese buyers offered more.
In general, it's all cold calculation by the White House.
Greenland's minerals also attract U.S. attention. Previously, American companies developed large oil deposits on the island. But in 2021, Greenland banned the extraction of oil, gas, and uranium on its territory. The island is rich in iron ore. It is also linked to the prospects for developing a nickel mineral resource base in the Arctic, even if natural wealth cannot be extracted. Due to harsh climatic conditions and low profitability, it is important for Americans to prevent Russian and Chinese companies experienced in such tough conditions from accessing the deposits.
Let's not forget about shipping. Due to melting glaciers, the northern sea route will shorten the distance from Asia to the US by 2030. The route will be 40% closer. Not only Trump knows this, but also Putin and Xi Jinping.
Greenland has long been a bone of contention in relations between major powers. While in 2019 the US discussed with Denmark the possibility of buying the island, China, albeit through foreign companies, had already fully begun developing Greenland's minerals. From Greenland, paths open to the vast and unexplored resources of the Arctic, where Russia has long been increasing its military presence. In the current circumstances, the country that owns Greenland, with a competent approach, could potentially become the richest in the world.
Greenland is the Arctic, meaning a crucial asset for the future, a serious competitive advantage for the long term.
The Arctic is undoubtedly the future of humanity, resource-wise, environmentally, transport-wise, and ultimately geopolitically. In simple terms, whoever controls the Arctic will control the world. Currently, among the Arctic nations, besides America, there are Russia, Canada, Norway, and Denmark, and the US is in the latter half of the list by territory size. Hypothetically, extending American jurisdiction to Canada and Danish-owned Greenland would naturally change this situation. In that case, the US would become either the first or second country in the Arctic. So Trump's statement is pure geopolitics.
Greenland is a litmus test of the new Cold War. The US is increasing military exercises in the Arctic. NATO declares the region an area of interest. Russia is restoring Soviet bases. China is building a polar Silk Road. Moreover, each of these countries spends up to $3 billion on the Arctic, and Greenland is the key to it.
A few years ago, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that the Arctic should remain a zone of dialogue, not confrontation. NATO didn't listen. Today, there are several military bases there, which Washington plans to integrate into a defense network.
And what about the Greenlanders? Their position is clear. We don't want to be a pawn. In 2023, the island's parliament banned foreign companies from mining uranium. And the Prime Minister stated, "Our goal is independence, but not like Puerto Rico, where free association with the US is occupation without rights."
Including Greenland in the U.S. would ensure full control over the North Atlantic and strengthen the U.S.'s claim as an Arctic power, competing with Russia, says senior researcher at the Institute of the USA and Canada, Iran Dmitry Kochegorov. As global warming and Arctic ice melting reveal natural resources, oil and minerals, this explains Trump's desire to acquire Greenland, he said.
Buying Greenland is impossible, declared Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, planning to allocate an additional $1.5 billion for the island's defense. But the loudest protests came from the Greenlanders themselves. Their response, memes of Trump in a polar bear skin and a parliamentary resolution. "We are open for business, but not for colonizers." 2-0.
We want to be ourselves. Our autonomy and freedom will never, never, never be up for discussion.
The question of sovereignty is extremely important for Greenland. In the referendum on self-governance, 75% of the island's residents voted for independence. In 2021, defying Copenhagen, the island began mining uranium independently.
How much could the island be worth? There's no answer to that question today. Deals of this scale haven't been recorded for a long time, although the Americans have tried to get their hands on it several times. We've already talked about Truman's attempt today.
U.S. political circles proposed plans to acquire Greenland at least twice in 1867 and 1946. In particular, in 1946, the Truman administration made a secret offer to Copenhagen to buy it, supposedly for $100 million. However, this plan was rejected by the Danish authorities.
Buying a piece on the map to expand territory. For the U.S., such an approach isn't that uncommon. Take Louisiana and Alaska, for example.
Jefferson bought Louisiana from the French in the early 19th century for $15 million, and half a century later, Johnson bargained Alaska from the Russians for half that price. Truman offered Denmark $100 million in 1946. Even adjusted for inflation, that money wouldn't buy a house in Manhattan today, let alone an island. It's more reasonable to focus on current prices for unused agricultural land in the U.S. Louisiana would cost at least $1 trillion now, and considering the economic and strategic potential of the Arctic island, the price could be several times higher.
Greenland today is balancing on two chairs. It wants sovereignty, but what about finances? Without Danish subsidies, it would barely survive. And if the island becomes independent, who guarantees that the U.S. won't offer protection in exchange for bases tomorrow? The history with Hawaii, Guam, and Puerto Rico teaches us the stars and stripes aren't removed, only added to the map.
Puerto Rico and other territories captured during the Spanish-American War have had and still have important geostrategic positions. That's why Washington still can't let go of Puerto Rico and Guam, as well as military bases in the Philippines and Guantanamo in Cuba. This is one manifestation of neo-colonialism.
So will Greenland be free and saved under the U.S.? The Inuit frown, their world doesn't need saving. Greenland's ice shield survived the Vikings, colonizers, and the Cold War, but will it survive the care of a new sheriff? It's a rhetorical question.
One might assume that if the U.S. becomes the first Arctic power, Washington will immediately begin to establish strict, including military control over the Arctic. Currently, they can't do this, as all Arctic powers, without exception, will resist. For each of them, the prospect of military escalation in the Arctic is certainly undesirable. And together with Russia, they will actively oppose it. Therefore, the U.S. is currently in the minority in the Arctic. But if they are not in the minority, bringing Canada and Denmark to their knees, it could lead to a sharp increase in military confrontation in the Arctic and subsequent military escalation.
In this sense, Denmark's resistance seems only a matter of time. We all know what happens to countries that refuse to make concessions to the White House. The U.S. always finds arguments of varying morality and strength to persuade even the most disobedient. Goodbye.